What's up, guys? I've always wanted to create a video for a challenge, and I thought, why not just do it? So before we waste any more time, let's just jump right into it, right? So the weekend was coming, and I had a decision between either playing League of Legends and getting stomped by 9-year-olds or flexing my hacking skills on a new Intigriti challenge. And after a losing streak, I decided to take a look at the new challenge. So the first thing we're going to do is open up the challenge in our most favorite browser. So the first thing we're going to do is open up the challenge site, scroll down to the functionality part of the challenge, and just enter some text and see what it does. Seems like it is a super secure HTML parser. Interesting. Don't want the whole HTML of the challenge to be inspected, right? We just right click on the challenge part, we click inspect, and we look into the source code where the actual challenge is hosted. So we get this URL, enter it in a new tab, and now we have the challenge right here without any instructions, whatever. Instructions, we have way less JavaScript and HTML to check. So we can again press F12 and look into the actual source code of the site. So we see there is no JavaScript in there. But this makes it already kind of suspicious, right? So we go to the debugger, and in the debugger we have the ability to actually check all the files of the challenge. So we see lots and lots of JavaScript directories that are for Node and also for React, because we can see on the favicon on the top right here that it's a react.js app. So we know that React apps come with tons and tons of libraries, but they don't really matter a lot to us. What really matters to us is something that looks out of the ordinary, that doesn't look like it's a part of React. So these two directories have a really suspicious name, right? And there is an index.js file in both of them. So when we open these files, we can check them, and we see that they actually create this input, right? This input that we see on the left right here. We see the parse button with the submit type, and we also see it on the left. So we can assume that this JavaScript or this file here creates this input, right? So when we check the other one, it should actually create the already parsed JavaScript. So we see here something strange, right? In line 42, we see DOM purify, and we know that DOM purify is there to actually strip our input to make it not harmful, right? To know that DOM purify strips down our HTML, we can assume that this method has something to do with our XSS not working probably. So what we can do now is check the rest of the script, but there's one big problem. Yeah, we can't really read it, right? There are weird document window A to B references, but there's nothing that we can actually read. So we can assume that this code is obfuscated, right? And the way it's obfuscated is it's taking one weird value that's probably base64 encoded, because A to B is used here, and it's actually selecting it via this identifier, right? So what we now have to do is we have to find the actual file where this dictionary or the correspondence between this key and the value is to be found. So we can go back to our file tree and just scroll down and look for anything suspicious, right? So we see there's an index.js file, there's a scheduler, there's a React DOM, and we can assume that most of these things don't really matter to us because it's Node, and it really doesn't affect our site directly. So what we can assume is it's probably somewhere here, right? And when we actually click down on router.js, we see those identifiers, right? We can find our identifiers. And what we can also find is the base64 value of the actual code that should be behind this identifier, the corresponding key, right? So what I made is write a simple bash script that just basically base64 decodes the right value of the key and just writes it into a file. And the result is this. Okay? Right here, we have every single value with its decoded value. And you can see that there are a lot of values that correspond to HTML methods and keywords and stuff, right? So we can assume that we can now reverse engineer the code. This gives us now the ability to create some pseudocode that's helping us to understand what the challenge is doing in the background. After 1 hour of filling in the blanks and using this as my guide, I come up with that. Beautiful. Now we can see that down there is the danger set in HTML with the sanitized HTML return value with the value of payload from URL provided. And we know that payload from URL is nothing else than a payload parameter from the HTTP request. When we look into the sanitized HTML, we can see the DOM-purify method.sanitize that basically says we are not able to use any non-zero day exercise exploit here. When we go down, we see a lot more lines that are probably not there to sanitize. Because we can see that there's a template element that's being created and passed to template variable. And we can also see that the inner HTML is basically the sanitized input from us. We also can see that this is getting passed on to get elements by tag name. Saying get elements by tag name shows us that all of the template elements will be put into there. And we use the first one because we see the brackets with the 0 in there. So template.content will then be passed on to handle.attributes. And this method is kind of suspicious because when we look into handle attributes, you can see that it basically iterates through every single element or child element and checks the attributes if it's containing data.debug or data-debug. So if it's containing data-debug, we create a new function with the value of data.debug attribute. So we also execute it. And this is probably the bingo we needed. Because now we know what we have to do and we can now go back to the challenge and try out some payloads. And we can now try out some payloads. So we know that we need a template element and we know that we need data minus debug and the value after it will be parsed into a new function. Now we have to define the functionality of the new function, and what we want is basically say alert and we say 1, so it's actually, I don't know, on newly gained knowledge we can now create some sick payloads. So we know that we need a template element and we know that we need a data minus debug attribute. Any value of this attribute will probably be the functionality of our function. So we simply want an alert 1. And we also need a tag at the beginning of the line, because otherwise we won't be able to actually check the children of the tag, because otherwise our template will be the only element and it wouldn't have any children. So we need the h2 as our element and the template tag will be the child of it. So it will be parsed and be entered into the function. So we click on parse and we should expect a alert 1. Perfect. We can now see the URL causing the access. We just simply enter this into the Intigriti challenge site. And we can now finally go to sleep. If you liked the video, let me know. For me, I will probably go to bed because I'm super tired right now. So bye.